Welcome to Lattes and Art, presented by J Squared Atelier. I'm James William Moore, and today we're doing a single shot. Just me and a microphone and some thoughts about one of the weirdest performance pieces in the art world. And yes, I'm talking about artist statements. Because the minute an artist has to explain their work, suddenly they sound like they were possessed by a grad seminar and a cloud of incense. You can know an artist in real life. You can talk to them at a reception. You can have coffee with them. They can be witty, perceptive, warm, weird in all the right ways, and completely capable of telling you exactly why they make what they make. And then you read their artist statement and think, who is this? Who kidnapped this person and replaced them with a haunted brochure? Because suddenly the artist who 5 minutes ago was saying something thoughtful like, I'm really interested in memory, performance, and how identity gets shaped by images, is now writing, my interdisciplinary praxis interrogates destabilized thresholds of liminal embodiment within contested visual terrains. No. No, it does not. Or maybe it does, and now I'm just irritated. Here's the thing. This is not just about artists being bad writers, because a lot of artists are not bad writers. This is about the art world creating a tone, a flavor, a posture, a very specific kind of institutional throat clearing that says, if you want to be taken seriously, you need to sound like you swallowed a symposium. And I hate that flavor because it's elitist. It's performative. And too often, it has less to do with helping people connect to art than with helping institutions feel important around art. So today, I want to talk about the weirdness of the artist statements, why they so often sound stiff, inflated, and vaguely haunted, and how galleries, museums, collectives, biennials, art schools, grant panels, and all the rest of the official culture machine help produce that weirdness. Because the problem is not that artists have something to say. The problem is that too often they are being trained, subtly or not subtly, to say it in a voice that sounds nothing like a human being. Now, to be fair, I am not against artist statements. In theory, an artist statement is supposed to be helpful. It's supposed to offer context, an entry point, a bit of guidance. Not a decoder ring, not a hostage note, not a chance to prove your own thesaurus and once survived a critique. Just context. What is the work concerned with? What questions are you circling? What materials matter to you? What tensions keep showing up? What kind of world are you building? At its best, an artist statement says, here's a way in. It doesn't explain the work to death. It doesn't flatten mystery. It doesn't stand over the viewer with a clipboard and say, actually, that's not the correct interpretation. It just opens a door. That's the ideal. But the reason artist statements so often go off the rails is because the art world rarely lets helpful be enough. Helpful is too ordinary, too accessible, too human. No. The statement must now also sound serious, professional, cultured, curatorial, theoretical, fundable, institution ready. And that is where the trouble begins. I think one of the reasons artist statements get so weird is because artists quickly learn that there is an approved art world voice. And once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. It's the voice of wall text that says almost nothing, but says it with incredible confidence. It's the voice of the gallery paragraph that sounds like it was assembled in a dimly lit office by 3 people afraid of using the word about. It's the voice that hovers over museums, biennales, collectives, grant applications, MFA critiques, open calls, curatorial essays, all of it. And that voice says, do not sound plain, do not sound direct, Do not sound too understandable. Above all, do not sound like a normal person who has ever been to a grocery store. Because heaven forbid, someone encounters art without first being made to feel slightly inadequate. And that is the part I can't stand. There is a kind of institutional art language that acts like clarity is suspicious. Like if a sentence makes immediate sense, maybe it isn't sophisticated enough. Like if ordinary people can read it without feeling stupid, perhaps it has failed some sacred cultural test. What a load of nonsense. That attitude does not make art deeper. It makes the room smaller. And the worst part is that artists often internalize it. They start trimming away their real voice. They start replacing clear thought with this approved fog. They start writing toward what they imagine a museum, a gallery, a collective, or a biennale wants to hear. So instead of saying, I used stage photography because I'm interested in performance, identity, and the tension between fantasy and everyday life, they're saying, my practice interrogates performative constructions through destabilized image ecologies of contested selfhood. Again, no. That is not a sentence. That is a chandelier having a panic attack. And yes, I am being snarky, but I'm being snarky because this flavor of writing is often less about communication than class signaling. It tells the audience, if you don't immediately understand this, the failure is yours. And dear God, I find that exhausting. Now, to be fair to artists, there are reasons this happens. Because artists are not stupid. They are responding to a system. When you are trying to get into shows, apply for grants, appeal to jurors, deal with curators, get taken seriously by institutions, or simply not get dismissed, you learn very quickly that there is a performance expected of you, not just in the work, in the language around the work. You are expected to sound intentional, but not too obvious, intellectual, but not too readable, personal, but not messy, critical, but not plain spoken, accessible, but not too accessible, because then somebody somewhere may fear that the peasants have wandered in and started enjoying themselves. And that pressure is real. So artists start writing in what they think is an acceptable institutional dialect, because it feels safer, because sounding simple can feel dangerous. Sounding direct can feel risky. Sounding like yourself can feel too exposed. And then the statement becomes this strange ritual where the artist is no longer just talking about the work, they're auditioning for legitimacy. That's the weirdness. It's not just awkward writing. It is anxiety meeting hierarchy on the page. Now, because this is a single shot, and I reserve the right to lovingly roast things, let's talk about a few classic artist statement species. First, the fog machine statement. This one is mostly nouns floating past each other in a vapor cloud. Identity, memory, space, absence, becoming. Maybe vulnerability shows up. Maybe liminality. Maybe there's a threshold. Oh dear Lord, there's always a threshold. This statement is technically full of words, but emotionally it feels like trying to hug a scented candle. Next, the museum wall voice statement. This is when the artist sounds like they have been kidnapped by institutional copywriting. Everything becomes detached. Everything becomes the work examines. Nobody is allowed to say, I care about, because apparently caring is too casual. Then there is the biennale flu statement. This one sounds international in the worst possible way. Not global, not expansive, just heavily jet-lagged and over-caffeinated. It uses phrases like critical intervention, site-responsive inquiry, and reframing visual discourse. while somehow never revealing what the artist actually made. Then we have the "please take me seriously" statement. This one breaks my heart a little because you can hear the fear in it. You can hear the artist trying to sound elevated enough, polished enough, institution safe enough, hoping this paragraph will protect them from being underestimated. And lastly, the statement that understands the work less than the viewer does. The work is alive, funny, smart, complicated, maybe even moving. And the statement next to it sounds like it was generated by a panel discussion trapped in an elevator. That disconnect is so common. And I think part of the reason it happens is because many artists make work from instinct, obsession, image, memory, experimentation, tension, and then are asked to retrofit all of that into the approved tone of cultural bureaucracy. And of course, it comes out weird. This is bigger than writing. What artist statements reveal is the lingering elitism built into so many art structures. And I know elitism gets thrown around loosely, but I mean something specific here. I mean the way institutions often reward a kind of distance, a kind of polish, a kind of language that creates the impression of seriousness by withholding ease. It's the old trick of making something seem more valuable by making it less welcoming. And I reject that, because art already asks a lot of people. It asks them to slow down, to notice, to interpret, to feel something, to be uncertain, to stay with ambiguity. Why, on all top of that, are we acting like they also need to pass a dialect exam? Why are so many galleries, museums, and institutional spaces still in love with language that makes regular people feel like they've arrived underdressed? Why are we still tolerating this atmosphere where the viewer is expected to nod solemnly in front of a paragraph they do not understand because nobody wants to be the one who says, "This sounds ridiculous"? And let me be clear, difficulty is not the problem. Some art is difficult. Some ideas are difficult. Some works deserve complexity. Fine. But complexity is not the same thing as pomp. Those are not twins. And too often, the institutional flavor of art writing slides right past complexity and lands squarely in self-importance. That's the flavor I don't like. That's the flavor I want nowhere near my own work. And yet I also feel for artists, because writing about your own work is hard, sometimes brutally hard. You make something out of instinct, image, memory, play, fear, irony, discomfort, obsession, all the strange ingredients that go into art. And then later somebody says, "Great, now summarize your interior life in one paragraph for a PDF." This is not a normal request. And for a lot of artists, this statement is where the work suddenly has to put on a bow tie. The work itself may be alive, risky, strange, sharp, tender, unruly. The statement is expected to stand beside it and behave. So yes, artists get weird. They panic, they posture, they overcompensate. They start writing as if a museum intern with a red pen is already judging them from 3 time zones away. I understand it, but I still think we need to resist it. Because once the statement stops sounding like the artist, something important has gone wrong. And frankly, I would rather read a statement with a little personality, a little edge, a little humanity, even a little imperfection, than another embalmed paragraph that sounds like it was approved by the Department of Elevated Murmuring. So what should an artist statement do? First, sound like a person, a real one. A person with a mind, a voice, a point of view, and some actual relationship to the work. Second, say something specific, not just, "My work explores identity and memory." Whose identity? What kind of memory? Why these materials? Why this imagery? Why now? You do not have to tell us everything, but give us something solid enough to hold. Third, invite rather than intimidate. A good statement does not loom over the viewer like a bouncer at the entrance to meaning. It says, here's a way into the work. Fourth, keep the work open. The statement should not smother the art. It should not act like a final answer key. It should help us pay better attention. And maybe most importantly, a good artist statement should not sound like the institution won. It should sound like the artist is still in the room. Now, I fully admit my bias here. I am deeply suspicious of art language that seems designed to impress other art people more than to communicate with actual human beings. That does not mean I'm anti-intellectual. Not even a little. I love depth. I love thought. I love context. I love serious engagement. But I do not believe seriousness requires stiffness. And I do not believe intelligence needs a costume. If your work is rich, it will survive a clear statement. If your ideas are layered, they will survive plain language. And if an institution only respects your work once you have translated it into a dialect of elegant fog, maybe the problem is not your voice. Maybe the problem is the institution's appetite for theater. So, artist statements are on my mind right now because my students are heading into their final project for the semester, which means they are now entering that special stage of art making where, in addition to making the work, they are also being asked to wrestle with this beautifully strange little creature we call the artist statement. And I've been watching that moment happen. I've been watching students make images, build ideas, test things, surprise themselves, and start to understand that making art is not just about technical skill. It's also about learning how to talk about what you've been doing and why. And that's hard because for a lot of them, this may be one of the first times they're being asked to pause and say, what am I interested in? What keeps showing up in my work? What am I actually trying to say? Why did I make it this way and not some other way? That's a real challenge. And honestly, I think it's good that it's a challenge. Because part of becoming an artist, and even just becoming aware of yourself as a creative person, is learning how to reflect on your choices, your instinct, your themes, your habits, your voice. But what I do not want for them, what I really do not want, is for them to think an artist statement only becomes legitimate once it stops sounding like them. I do not want them believing that clarity is somehow unsophisticated or that the way to earn credibility is to start writing in institutional fog. Because this is exactly how the weirdness keeps reproducing itself. That's how generation after generation of artists learn to sand down their actual voice and replace it with whatever flavor of cultural formality they think will get them through the door. And I hate that. What I want for my students, and honestly for artists at any stage, is to understand that an artist statement can be thoughtful without being stiff, intelligent without being inflated, reflective without becoming a performance of elitism. I want them to know that saying what you mean in your own voice is not a weakness. That is not the less serious option. That is often the braver option. So maybe that's part of why this is sitting with me right now, because I'm watching students begin the process. And I want them to wrestle with the statement, yes, but I want them to wrestle towards honesty, not towards intimidation. So yes, artist statements are weird. They are weird because art is weird. They are weird because language is imperfect. They are weird because artists are being asked to pin down things that often begin in image, feeling, tension, and intuition. But they are also weird because the institution of art has spent a long time rewarding a style of speech that feels exclusive, inflated, and frankly, a little addicted to its own perfume. And I'm not interested in that flavor. I want artist statements that sound alive. I want them to sound like artists, not institutional ventriloquism. I want context without condescension, deep without fog, thought without posturing, voice without apology. Because the best artist statements do not stand above the work like a lecture. They stand beside it like an invitation. And art needs more invitations, not more velvet ropes made out of vocabulary. Thanks for joining me for this one shot of Lattes and Art, presented by J Squared Atelier. I'm James William Moore, and I'm glad you were here. Be sure to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you listen, and check the show notes for more from J Squared Atelier. And if you like art conversations with a little more history, drama, and divine mess, be sure to check out our sister podcast, Art Happens, the Divine Mess of Art History. Until next time, make the work, say what you mean, and don't let anybody convince you that sounding human is somehow less serious.